Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, your resident Christian apologist. All right, today we are starting our very first episode of the Tomkins Controversy Revisited mini-series, the first ever mini-series on Apologetics 101. You're probably asking, Brian, why are you revisiting this subject matter? Didn't you say that you are going to just kind of move away from this topic matter after the last episode of the Tomkins Controversy? Yes, I did. And I did move away, and I moved on from this topic matter. So, what brought me back? Well, several things actually. One, because we did a recent episode of All We Ape series, which is fixing to end in the month of August, and on the chimp human chimp percent similarity, and discussing that. Just like a real quick video that got me thinking, and so I started looking online to see if there was any thing written in the literature concerning the unalignable regions of the genome that we discussed in that video, and I came across the paper that showed the human chimp genome fully sequenced, and they found 12.5% to 27.3% differences between six great apes, including chimpanzees and humans, comparing it to the fully sequenced human T2T, the fully human or fully sequenced human genome. And they compared the fully sequenced ape genomes to that, and they discovered there was a lot more differences than they realized. And when those differences were factored in, it dragged the overall genetic percent similarity down to 85%. I did a short video on this as well, discussing that. I also discussed it with Rob Carter. Found out that Richard Buggs had done a follow-up blog that he did, following up his 2018 blog, which of course we talked about as 2018 again in in that short video. And turns out he did a follow-up blog talking about that particular study. And that was another thing. There was some updated information since the Tompkins Controversy series had ended, with not only the 26% similarity between the Y chromosomes between the chimpanzees and human Y, showing that they only they're only similar at 26% overall genetic similarity, and less than 30%. And now we have the fully sequenced ape genomes that now show that human and chimps are about less than 85% similarity. And so we're going to be talking about that in this mini series. Another thing is that Erica, whenever she did her debate with Dr. Jerry Bergman, which I did a recent debate review with Dr. Jerry Bergman and Dr. Peter Line, reviewing that debate. Erica had tried to claim that that she had overturned Tompkins's results of 85% similarity, which she didn't do, but she actually got discredited during that interview. But she claimed that in the debate, and so from that, also she did a recent video calling it "I Killed This Creationist Argument," which she doesn't even mention her major mistake that she confessed to in that video. We're going to be discussing that in this video as well. And she doesn't mention that in her video. Talk about that crucial mistake that she had made, as well as she didn't talk about the fact that she had utilized Glenn Williamson's misrepresentation of Tompkins' study in her final calculations for a redone experiment. She also doesn't mention that. And and then she did, shortly after that, she also did a video on the study between chimps and humans similarity, and I think she tried to minimize the differences. There's a thing I like to call damage control, where when the evolutionist gets data and discoveries and evidence that doesn't line up with their particular beliefs, they try to soften the blow of that uh, research, that data, that evidence, that conclusion, and try to maybe try to interpret it within their own evolutionary framework somewhere. uh, but they try to soften the blow, and so that's what some of the evolutionists have been doing since that paper came out. Erica did it. Dr. Joe Dove did it, and so that's why I decided to go ahead and revisit this topic matter in the Tomkins Controversy Revisited miniseries. So that's what we're going to be doing in this miniseries today. Today we're going to be just kind of discussing what what has gone before, what has been done initially, because I think there's a lot of confusion on it. I got called a liar on Erica's channel several times. I said that I got called a liar about Erica being discredited, which he was. And I got called a liar even about those differences, which is kind of funny because shortly after I referenced those differences to her evolutionary audience, who kept calling me a liar on it, Erica does a video on it, reading that very same line where it shows that they did find 12.5% to 27.3% differences between these sixth grade apes and the human genome. And so, but yeah, kept getting called a liar on Erica's channel. I wonder who Erica's followers get that from, just accusing people of lying just because they don't agree with them. But anyway, so today we're going to be discussing those events, what took place on the Tomkins controversy, and what happened there. And we'll be discussing that right after this. All right. So basically, the way that all this started, um, originally it started with Dr. Richard Bugs had came up with some low percent similarities. He's an evolutionary geneticist. Came up with some low percent similarities between human and chimps, and then Tompkins ended up doing the same thing and came up with some low percent similarities. Originally, they both came up about 70%. Then later, they both came up with 85%, just to kind of summarize everything. And Tompkins wrote 5 different peer-reviewed papers on this. And obviously, creationists used this data against the evolutionists, and Erica didn't like that, so she, and or even before Erica, Glenn Williamson had produced some material on this as well.
Okay, so Jeffrey Tomkins has put out another paper comparing the chimpanzee genome to the human genome, and a couple of people have pointed me towards
Things on his 2018 study, particularly, and that got some attention on the internet. And Erica had, and of course, Glenn wrote a paper which he submitted for publication, but it was rejected for publication. So
now, if you're a younger creationist out there, you might be doing the usual little jig and saying, hey, well, if Glenn Williamson's analysis was so good and Jeffrey Tomkins was so wrong, why didn't Glenn publish his criticisms of Jeffrey Tomkins in the Answers Research Journal itself? And to that I say, dear viewer, he did. Or at least he tried. Glenn Williamson submitted that exact manuscript we were looking at to the Answers Research Journal, remember, a young Earth creationist journal, and didn't hear anything for a hot minute. So Glenn reached out to Andrew Snelling, one of the main guys working at the ARJ. Now, Andrew Snelling is another young Earth creationist, obviously. He's a geologist. And this is what he said to Glenn on the status of his submitted paper with regard to the bug in BLAST. Hi Glenn, good day. I'm getting back to you with an update on where things are at. Jeff Tomkins and Nathaniel Jeanson have given me a report on the analysis of your paper. They say that the main issue with Glenn's paper is that it is claimed that there is a fault in BLAST N under certain conditions which don't apply to parameters Jeff used, that no one has proven one way or another. They complain about Glenn's specificity for a moment before saying they conclude that Williamson's apparent lack of biological training, lack of familiarity with the biological literature, and his inability to analyze and report his own results, it is difficult to see the value in continuing to engage him, let alone give him the platform to air his uninformed and unhelpful views. Then Snelling comes back in with, there you have it. As editor, I accept the report. I agree you should take up the fault you claim to have found with the folks who wrote the code at NCBI. We will therefore not be publishing your paper. Thanks for trying and for being patient. We know you will not take this decision easily, but until such a time as you've contacted the NCBI folks and convinced them there is a problem in their code, which evolutionists also use, we will not consider your paper any further. Cheers, Andrew. Glenn responds, I'm actually not upset. I'm more energized than anything else. This was kind of the fight I was expecting. It all seemed to be going a little too easily up to now. While I go away and do some more work on this, I'd like you and Jeff to think about two things. The first thing that Glenn notes is that BLAST has been in use for 30 years, but there have been bugs in almost every version that are quickly caught and fixed, meaning double checking is at least worth consideration. Then Glenn says, notice the one thing that Dr. Tomkins didn't do was the one thing he could do to dispel the entire paper, referring to Glenn's paper. Run his experiment again, but use parameters that can identify the sequences that don't return hits and then blast them manually. It's quite telling that he hasn't done this. I imagine it's because he's terrified of it. I don't give up very easily. I'll be in contact soon. Cheers. Snelling responds, hi Glenn, I never expected you would give up. However, you are wrong in your assertions. Jeff has been and continues to do new runs to test and retest his work. He is still confident in the outcomes, and he has had Nathaniel Jeanson looking over his shoulder. Furthermore, he has been in contact with the programmers at NCBI, and he is fully aware of the code's history and use. Meanwhile, you should do some more homework yourself. Cheers for now, Andrew. The two go back and forth for a while about contacting NCBI before Snelling responds to Glenn and informs him that he has been in contact with Jeffrey Tomkins. Tomkins, it seems, has come around to the idea that there may in fact be a problem with BLAST, but proposes, quote, my solution to the whole mess is to publish my own report describing the observed problems with the BLAST N algorithm and acknowledging Glenn in it, unquote. Then Snelling comes back in with, so rather than you, quote, shooting, unquote, at Jeff, you should be writing a paper to get published in a bioinformatics journal. Only then will you have established the bugs in the algorithm among these experts, will you be in a position to then establish what the consequences are. Meanwhile, Jeff has promised to publish the results of his own investigations, which you will definitely get to see in due course. This does not rule out a future exchange with Jeff, should that be necessary. You've been persistent to be sure, but for now we will not be publishing your paper. Thanks for your patience. Cheers, Andrew.
He decided to publish it online. It got some attention by the evolutionists as well. And then Erica decided to do some experiments. So she does a series of experiments, including a self to self. And in her experiments, she found different percentages, like usually roughly around 80s, or sometimes around the mid 80s. And she thought, well, I must have replicated Tompkins's experiments. Um, and because she copied and pasted some of the parameters from his paper directly into Blast.
So I did the comparisons with a ton of help from Glenn Williamson himself, as well as from my husband, who's also a computer programmer. And we devised an excellent system to do these comparisons, and we ran quite a few of them. So this is the config file. It contains the various methods that Blast has available to it right now, as designed by me and influenced by like Glenn and my husband and things like that. So there are only 4 options here. I've really trimmed the fat. But what I hope you can appreciate is we have a good gapped method, a good ungapped method. This is just so you can compare the difference between gapped and ungapped. It's mostly default parameters. Then we have Tomkins 2013 and Tomkins 2013 with max HSPS. It depends on which version of Blast you're using. If you want to replicate my work for yourself, make sure that if you're using Tomkins 2013, you're using the version of Blast that he used in that paper. If you use the second one, Tomkins 2013 with max HSPS, this is going to be the one that we're using in the following examples. Sometimes I've called it like Tomkins True or Tomkins Fixed or Tomkins Real, whatever. This is the actual way that he was doing it with the max HSPS function available to him because it was like Blast had it as a default. And then Tomkins 2018, if you feel like using this, you can. If you just want to explore his methods, be my guest. But these are like copied and pasted from his paper, so feel free to double check me on this.
And the program in which Tompkins had used. BLAST is an acronym that stands for Basic Local Alignment Search Tool, and that is what she used to assess, or what he used to assess the percent similarity. It's used by geneticists all over the world, and so she does the same thing. And like I said, she gets like around in the 80s, somewhere in the sometimes in the low 80s, sometimes in the high 80s, but somewhere gravitating around mid 80s. So she assumed she had replicated Tompkins' method and correctly, and she also did a self to self, and it was less than 100%.
So here's Dogful. Dogful 1, this is a downloadable Canis familiaris. It's just the dog. It's a downloaded dog genome. And directly underneath it is Dogful B, a copy of that dog. This is the same dog. It's the same reference genome. It's the same individual. So I'll click enter for dog 1, and we'll compare it to dog 2 here. Okay, so there's a lot of different variants. That's for like a top level. I believe this is top level downloaded, so it has a lot of different variants. But this is the critical portion down here. Here's our chromosomes. So we're going to compare chromosome 1 to chromosome 1. And here's what we're going to do. 100 sequences. 100 sequences. 100 sequences. Enter. And we're going to use the good method. So it's going to take a couple of seconds because this is like a super fast way of, it's like a pretty efficient way of running. And there you go. Max target sequence 1, dog to dog, chromosome 1 to chromosome 1, the same sequence, 100% similarity. Good to go. And my husband was even cool enough to put weighted and unweighted, like he programmed this in. That's how we know that Blast doesn't do it automatically, because he had to program this in. So there we go. So now let's try Jeff's method. Generate random win. Same thing, dog to dog. We'll use chromosome 1 to chromosome 1. We'll generate 100 sequences, and Blast is like the program that he's generated here, like the code that he wrote, the script, is smart enough to know that since we've just done 100 random sequences, it's going to use the same previous ones. So see, it knows we don't need to make them, and this time we're going to use Tomkins 2013. So there you can see, it's his exact methods minus the number of threads because my computer is weaker. E-value 10, word size 11, max target sequence 1, dust no, soft masking false, and ungapped. Okay, so it takes a little longer to run Tomkins' method because he doesn't have a very critical parameter in there. And while that's running, I'm going to show you what that parameter is using Excel here. So remember that the good that returned 100% similarity in max target sequence 1 here what we did is we had this little parameter here, max HSPS1, right? Max HSPS1. Tomkins' 2013 methods, they don't have that. And my understanding of how BLAST works is that's what's making sure that we're only returning like the best matches instead of like any willy-nilly partial 10-base pair match. And that's what drags his percent similarity down, despite the fact that he's using ungapped, or that's what pulls the similarity down further with ungapped, even when you're comparing something to itself. So the ungapped is the problem. The fact that he's missing this, I guess, critical parameter here makes the problem worse. Really, it's mostly ungapped. And there you go. There's your percent similarity for Tomkins' 2013 methods. 89.1% weighted similarity of that dog's chromosome to itself. The fact that it can't return an identical similarity for the same 100 base pairs to, like, in one to the same organism, right, that it can't find that 100% identity, means the methods are flawed.
Okay, now I'm just going to put this little insert in as well, discussing that the exact opposite was actually true. This is one of the problems with trying to copy and paste the parameters from the paper, because it doesn't take into account that that certain parameters might be defaulted in the actual version that's being used. And she didn't think about that at the time she did her initial studies, and that's what caused the issue, because she assumed Tomkins didn't do max HPS1 because it wasn't listed in the parameters, but it was defaulted in that particular version of BLAST, which means it was being used, which means she did not replicate Tomkins' method. And this came out later. She even confessed to it. This will be discussed later in the video as well. But she actually confessed to not being able to replicate Tomkins' method then, because of the fact that she had not had max HPS1 in with Tomkins' method, and when she did that, she averaged out all the spurious results. Actually, it had nothing to do with gap or non-gap. That was a red herring. It wouldn't matter if you use gap or ungap. You can actually use either one. And scientists have used both, by the way. So you can't argue that ungap is bad and gap is good or whatnot. It's irrelevant. You can use both and still come up with a good percent similarity of the overall genetic similarity, regardless whether you're using gap or ungap. Now, the real problem was the fact that she failed to use max HSPS1, which sets the best alignment, and so she wound up getting all these spurious matches, and she ended up averaging out all those spurious matches. And when you do that, you actually do get less than 100% on self-to-self. But it wasn't Tomkins that was doing that, it was Erica. The reason Erica got 100% on the others, because she included max HPS1 there. She did not include max HPS1 in the parameters that she used on trying to replicate Tomkins' method, and instead got that bogus her results. And it's not just that it made her self-to-self bogus, it made all of her results bogus as a result. She assumed that if she got somewhere in the 80% range somewhere, that she must have been able to replicate Tomkins' method, but this was false. This was confirmation bias. This wasn't true. She didn't replicate Tomkins' method at all. And so naturally, we started to look into it, and I had a series ongoing series, a 14-episode series called The Tomkins Controversy, in which I was actually looking into that, responding to Erica. I had done a interview with Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins sometime before all this, probably shortly after Erica had dropped her initial video that went viral, and and I had done an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins, and now the interview was already scheduled up even before Erica dropped that video. I have here today a geneticist from Institute for Croatian Research, Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins. And We're going to go ahead and jump in. Dr. Tompkins, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then show your, I know you have a PowerPoint presentation. I have some questions here, but I'm going to save those until after you get done with your presentation. You might even answer a few of them. So it wasn't a response necessarily to what Erica did, but I did bring up Erica's concerns and that sort of thing. So Erica felt the need to respond to my interview with Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins as well, assuming her experiments were correct, and so she went ahead and did it that way. And in response to that, so my Tompkins controversy was also in response to Erica's response to the interview as well as overall, and it dealt with the entire controversy basically. And it turned out that Erica had made a serious error, a very critical mistake. In BLAST, you can there's a parameter called max HSPS. HSPS stands for high scoring pairs. That's how BLAST scores it. It scores it like the best one-to-one alignment, which is usually referred to as the best alignment, and it's always at the top, scoring the highest. And then all the other ones score after that. And of course, you wind up with a lot of spurious matches too, where you get alignments within alignment. It's kind of weird. So you can even get alignment and then get alignments from that one alignment as well as other sequences and things like that. And you can get a multitude of alignments. They're not the best alignment. They're not good alignments, but you can get them. And so there's a way in BLAST to set it so you can only get the best alignment. And to do this, you simply take max HSPS, the parameter max HSPS, and you set it to 1. When you do that, you get only the best alignment. Now, Erica apparently assumed, I guess because she was copying and pasting the parameters. One of the things I didn't really deal with in the Tomkins controversy is that when you just simply copy and paste parameters, the problem with doing this is that doesn't necessarily mean you replicate the method. For one, you don't know what is defaulted in that particular version, which is where one of the mistakes that Erica had made. She just assumed that the parameters would all be defaulted, or parameters would be all listed, but if it's defaulted in that particular version, then there will be no need to list it in the first place. Another thing is that a lot of scientists will a lot of times streamline these parameters, and not everything that they had set the program to may actually be in the paper. It's weird. You think that everything would be in the paper, but it isn't. There's actually parameters that may not actually be in the paper that could have been set afterwards or reprogrammed afterwards or part of the Python script or whatever the case may be. It may not always be in the paper. And this is true widespread, like evolutionary scientists would do this in the paper. I mean, it's not just Tomkins. It's not just creationists. It's not just evolutionists. It's just something that happens when they're writing peer-review papers. They tend to streamline these parameters. They use the basic parameters and put them in the paper, but they may not include everything that they put, every code, every Python script, every parameter that they might end up using. So that's kind of an oddity, but it winds up where it makes it harder to sit there and just simply assume that all you have to do is copy those parameters on the paper and then paste them, and then automatically you're replicating their method. That's not always the case to begin with. But in any given case, apparently Tomkins had the version of the parameter max HPS1 in that particular version. Erica didn't know this, but it gets even deeper. Not only did she get the spurious matches from that, but she wound up having a program in her script that actually averaged out all of her results. This was discovered by Dr. Rob Carter. And so she had these uh, uh, program this program that averaged out all of her results. So when you average out a bunch of spurious alignments, they're not 100%. Not just in percent similarity, but they're not 100% in length either. You know, they're like partial. You know, even within alignment, they're just partial bits, right? And you end up getting. And so what happens when you do a self to self on that? You get less than 100%. This was something that I had discovered originally, and I did this because I had a interview with Dr. Ian Korf, who thought Tomkins was doing it, but no, he's an evolutionist, geneticist, biologist, but he thought Tomkins was doing it, but it wasn't Tomkins that did it. It was Erica that was doing it. We didn't know at the time, but I realized that Erica was averaging out those spurious results. I didn't know how she was doing it until she ended up confessing to it. When she confessed to it, I sent it immediately to Dr. Rob Carter, and Dr. Rob Carter said that yeah, and he discovered a program in her script that showed that she was averaging out all of those results. And so I ended up having a video on that, talking about that. And so it got really, really exploded on the internet as a result during the Tomkins controversy. So she was actually discredited.
But I really wanted to put the final nail in the coffin. So when I saw this number, I thought to myself, well, if two human populations aren't going to show up as similar to one another or nearly identical to one another, what would happen if I compared a human to a human, the identical two reference genomes, one reference genome to itself? And at this point, I'd wasted well over a month of time doing all of these comparisons, because I also included his 2018 methods, which we'll get to in a moment. I was running all of these comparisons. It was taking forever. It was like I was maybe getting through a genome a day, but then I had to run it twice, or 3 times, excuse me, for all 3 forms of methods, the good, 2013, and 2018. So I was pretty exhausted. So I was like, okay, I'm going to run one chromosome, and I'm only going to run 100 sequences. That's it. First, I tested it with the good method. I used chromosome 21 because it's the smallest chromosome, and I ran chromosome 21 against itself using conventional means, and of course, as I should have, I got a 100% similarity. Then I ran the same thing with Tomkins' method, and here's what I got. 83.83% similar to itself. You are done, Tomkins. This method, it's through. It's finished. Throw the towel in. Oh, and by the way, this was the same issue back with the 2011 paper from earlier. Dozens and dozens of hours wasted just to show that your method is bogus.
So if you align a sequence to itself, there is something we call the major diagonal, which is every letter aligned to every other letter. So for example, if this is A, C, G, and T, this is also A, C, G, and T. They match up with each other. And it goes all the way down here, and they think we're looking for 84,000 bases. That's what all of this is up here. It's 84,000 bases that are 100% identical. All of the sequence and all of the sequence will align to itself with 100% identical.
I think I know what you're talking about. You're saying that not all of the matches are aligned.
No, but let me finish. But there's also a sequence over here. Let's imagine it's not ACGT, it's AGGT. And so that produces an alignment right here. And that alignment is not 100% identical, it's 75%. That A matches that A. That C is aligned with this G. That's a mismatch. That G is together and that T. So this alignment over here, 75%, 100%. And there's lots of other alignments all over the place that are not this one. This alignment right here is 100% identical. And when you align a sequence to itself, it doesn't just report one alignment, it produces many different alignments, and there's other ones that are significant. BLAST finds multiple local similarities, not just one. This is one of the extra ones.
I don't even know the pieces, though.
I've talked about this before.
Yeah,
This is, but neither Erica nor Tomkins is doing, let me show you something else though. Okay, so one of the things that you can do is you could say, but I only want to see one alignment per sequence. Just show me one alignment per sequence. Now if you do that, then you would just get this one. Just show me the one best alignment per sequence. You would get this one. You wouldn't see this one, just this one. However, if when you're searching a sequence, you search against multiple different sequences, but when you do a search, it's like, I'm going to take this one sequence and search the whole genome. Take this other sequence and search the whole genome. You do that over and over again. You not only get the alignment for yourself, you will compare yourself to a completely different sequence, and you might also find similarities to a completely different sequence.
Because Tomkins only taken the top hit. None of those parameters, and I've tried all the different parameters I could try, none of them should affect self to self. It doesn't matter what you mask or what you blank or if you do gaps or not gaps. It doesn't matter. Self to self should give you 100%. And Erica, when I do it using a gap search, dust or no dust, that's the only difference between Tomkins and you that I can see. I get 100% identity when I do a genome against itself or a chromosome against itself. 100% identity. As expected. What's going on with your computer program?
So the very first thing I did was go and make sure that Jeffrey Tompkins actually wasn't using max HSPS in his parameters. So I went to go check, I found his parameters, and sure enough, BLAST parameters utilized were as follows: E value 10, word size 11, max target sequence 1, dust, no, soft asking false, ungapped, and number of threads 6. So I saw that and I was like, okay, well, did Rob Carter replicate Tompkins' methods correctly? I popped on over to his GitHub associated with the video that he released, because he said he was uploading all of his programs and his methodologies and things like that. And I opened it up, and sure enough, there's no max HSPS here either. So I was like, that's the reason. So Carter isn't actually replicating Tompkins' methods correctly. So I was feeling good. I was feeling happy. I was like, Carter has made the error here. But I wanted to double check. I went and reread all of Jeffrey Tompkins' stuff again, and as you know, there's quite a bit of it, and it's a difficult read. And I realized, the reason Tomkins doesn't have max HSPS in that 2015 test is because he was running it on an older version of BLAST where max HSPS was default. The point being, he was utilizing max HSPS, and I wasn't when I was replicating his methods. So all of those Tomkins results for the 2011 to 2015, they don't matter. They're wrong. And that includes my beloved bust of how Tompkins' methods can't even return 100% similarity of something to itself. That was because I was utilizing the non-max HSPS Tompkins parameter. Sucks because I copied and pasted the parameters directly into my config file, thinking that that would kind of avoid any potential for misconstruing his methods or missing something or the other. But it turns out I was just using a too modern version of BLAST. That was my downfall. So wow, yikes. No excuse for this one, right? Like, this is just a regular run-of-the-mill bona fide mistake. This isn't an incomplete answer. This is a big old goof up. Bad. And like, I know you know because we've talked about it earlier, but not utilizing max HSPS, like, I should have known because that is super, super bad, even for Tompkins. That's absurd. You would have to be the biggest intentional liar on the planet or really, really bad at genetics to not utilize max HSPS in your genomic comparison. Show you the consequences of something like this, right? So I'm doing the same thing as we did before, but instead of using a human and a chimp, I'm using the human versus itself. So human chromosome 1 compared to a legitimate copy of human chromosome 1. We're doing 100 sequences again, and we're going to use my original Tomkins 2013, which lacks the max HSPS function. Now, typically this takes a hot minute, so you'll forgive me if I fast forward us through this. I mean, goodness, I really should have caught this. Like, this is just insane. This is ridiculous. Looking at this, weighted, unweighted, or God forbid you use Tomkins's weighting scheme on this erroneous Tomkins methodology, it is just a mess. I mean, again, you would have to be a real bonehead to actually not use max HSPS. And Tomkins, thankfully, is better than that. Now, Dr. Carter didn't figure this out. He seems to think that there's some kind of bug in my program. I found that very irritating because my husband is extremely good at his job, arguably better at his job than I am at mine. So no, Dr. Carter, there isn't a bug in the program. It was just a bona fide knucklehead mistake on my end.
Look, this is a programming mistake that was actually discovered by Rob Carter. We're going to get into that here in a little bit more. But look what this was pointed out to me by Rob Carter. Look what it says on data row. Whatever is it doing? It's doing this per row. And so Rob Carter says, okay, what is it doing then? You know, per row. What's it doing per alignment? Well, if you go down here a little bit, you see p ident sum plus equals. What this means is that every alignment, it is totaling it up. It is totaling every alignment up. Then when you go down here to the unweighted section, look, p ident sum divided by total length. So it's taking the total percent identity of every alignment and dividing it by the length. Wow. All right, so this is a programming error.
All right, here's what I think was going on. All right, let's say for simplistic purposes, we have 5 different alignments that happen. Okay. Let's say you mask the repeats. If you mask the repeats, you won't have that repetitive stuff, and it won't create a lot of extra alignments. And these alignments are the extra alignments that are being created from these repetitive elements aren't very long. They're short sequences, so they usually never. If you do a sub-to-sub analysis of that, you would never do 100% if you're doing that. But putting that aside for a second, let's say if you have 5 alignments, okay. In camera here, 5 alignments. And let's say all 5 of them are 100%. If you do a global alignment on all 5 alignments, you're gauging 100% scale. What would you come up with? Well, if you're doing 100% scale, if you're factoring in those 500s and you're totaling it up at the 100% scale, and they're all 100%. Each alignment is 100%, then it's going to come up to mathematically 100%. Okay? That's why she gets 100% on her self-to-self, because her repeats are being masked out. Now, Tomkins isn't using any masking because a lot of these low complexity regions are where a lot of the differences are. So he wants every sequence in order to test that, in order to see where if it will create more differences as a result. Alright, so he doesn't mask out the repeats, but he uses the best alignment. Now, with Erica, because she's thinking that he's totaling up the matches, let's say you have 5 alignments again, but this time each one's a different percent. Like the first one, the best alignment, it's always going to be 100%. 100%. Then you have, let's say 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%. All right. So you have those 5 alignments, and they are each a different percentage. Okay. Or even if a couple of them are the same, it wouldn't matter. But I'm just using this hypothetically. And you did a global percent of that, and engaged it on a 100% scale. Would you get 100% out of that? No, you wouldn't. So if you total up all the percentage of all the matches in doing one sequence, and you got all the alignments being added up, and it's going to get the self, which is also adding up all the alignments, and it's doing it on a total of 100% scale, and they're not all 100%, and they're not all the same length, and you got lots of spurious alignments involved in it. Would you get 100%? No. That's why she doesn't get 100% of Tomkins. But she's not actually replicating Tomkins method correctly. If she was, she'd be using the best alignment. Now, what if I took Not those 5 results exactly, but the first one, which is 100%. Okay? And then I compare it against itself. Would I get 100%? Yes. I would get 100% every single time. It's because she's factoring those other 4 and the 5th one together that she's getting less than 100%. That's why she's getting less than 100%. That's what I think is actually going on here.
Both via email and in Erica's video and in comment section, but in Rob Carter's video and also in a video by Apologetics 101. And boy, is he excitable in that video. Their claim is that Dr. Carter found a devastating programming error in the code that Erica's husband wrote that calculated the final result. As it turns out, this quote-unquote error only serves to show up Rob's newbie status with Blast, and also demonstrates that he really didn't understand the central point of the paper I submitted back in 2014. So let's listen to Rob, who I think is doing his best to hide how happy he is about finding this. Anyway, let's go.
So why is Gutsuck Gibbon getting 86% identity? It's because she's looking at all the garbage also. 86.6%, that's the average that I got these 25 things, very similar to what she did. And sure enough, she published her program on GitHub. So I went to the GitHub and I found the program. There's a bunch of files in there. I figured out which one it was, and I'm scanning through this, and I'm looking at it, and it's right there. The program will take the blast results file, they'll open it up, and it will go for every row in the file. Each row is a hit for every single row. I'm looking at it, and it says p-ident sum plus equals parse float of p-ident. In other words, add up all the percent identity values, make a sum of everything in this potentially very long list, and then later on, unweighted equals the percent identity sum divided by the total length. She just averaged potentially millions of nonsense spurious results. That is not what Tomkins did. It's clear from his papers that is not what he did.
All right. It's not a either-or situation. It is not just the program. It's not just the lack of max HPS 1. Glenn doesn't understand what we're saying because he's trying to make it one or the other. Either this is the mistake or that's the mistake. He doesn't seem to understand it's and or both situation. They are both the problem, not just one, both of them. Carter was trying to make this clear in his video. I explicitly made it clear in my previous video, so he definitely misrepresented me. I think he misrepresented Carter too, because Carter actually does voice both the lack of using max HPS 1 and the program in the video that he made that Glenn is responding to. Glenn doesn't understand this. And I explicitly stated it. I even clarified what I meant. I said, technically speaking, you could have that program there, and if max HPS 1 was done, like you just getting the best alignment, then that program would not be a problem. You could get the best alignment each and every time. I said this in my video. I explicitly said this in my video, okay, on confirming the narrative. I said it specifically in my video, okay, and I said if you could technically have max HPS 1 not selected, you get all those garbage results and still select the best alignment. It doesn't the blast does not automatically calculate all those percentages up. You have to have a program there that's going to calculate all those results. That was Carter's point. She both had the lack of max HPS 1 selected, which made she got all those results, and she had that program, which calculated all those results. So Glenn is literally misrepresenting both Carter's and definitely my position. I explicitly stated this and explained this in confirming the narrative. I actually said this. So he actually doesn't understand our arguments. He's showing ignorance of not understanding what we're actually arguing. It is a package deal. It's not just one or the other. Technically, you could have one done, and if the other mistake wasn't done, then that wouldn't be a problem. And vice versa. The mistake is really kind of like a two for one deal here. It's not just the program. The program itself would not be a problem if she had exercised that parameter. But if she exercised that parameter, but the program wasn't there, again, that wouldn't be a problem because you wouldn't have nothing to calculate all those results. The error, the mistake, is that both of them was the issue. Not just one, both of them.
But we are very busy here at Biblical Genetics. I just got back from a tour of northern Indiana. I landed in South Bend Airport, and I was going to go to a town in southern Michigan, just 2 hours away from where I was, a town that is named after the biblical name for the underworld, but there was a giant snowstorm when I landed. In fact, that town, it was a cold day there. One might even say it was frozen over. Now, why would I skirt around breaking the third commandment here on biblical genetics? It's because something incredible has happened, something unexpected, something non-probable, and that is that Erica Gutzik-Gibbon has admitted to massive mistakes on video.
Now, she did try to redo those experiments. The problem, however, is that when she went to redo those experiments, she used Glenn Williamson's misrepresentation of Tomkins's study. Because Glenn assumed that Tomkins was, or believed that Tomkins was taking the quarry length, or the percent of the quarry length, and dividing it by that, or dividing by the quarry length. Okay, when you deal with a local alignment, you got the sequence here, right? You got the quarry, and then you got a local alignment. So it tries to find regions of local alignment and tries to find the best one-to-one alignment there. And so if you take an alignment which is shorter than the sequence, but you divide it by the sequence, or you divide it by the quarry, right? And you take it as a percentage of the quarry, even though the alignment is shorter than the quarry, well, then that would be problematic, right? And so Glenn tried to argue this for Tompkins' 2013 paper, as well as his 2016 paper, and he assumed it on Tompkins' 2015 paper as well, and that's not what Tompkins did. And so Erica assumed Glenn Williams' argument on this and calculated based on that, and then came up with less than 100% on self-to-self, as well as some bogus results of her experiments. She assumed, and of course, if you actually look at the experiments, they're not exactly 85% to begin with, but again, just like before, she assumed that she must have replicated Tompkins' experiments. This is called confirmation bias, but she assumed that, and she did not replicate Tompkins' experiment.
And this is what it looks like. And as I just explained, part of the process of replicating the DNA for sequencing is inserting it into a cloning vector. And typically the DNA that belongs to your cloning vector is at the beginning of the read. So that red DNA there does not belong to the species that you're actually trying to sequence, be that human or chimpanzee or anything else. As for the yellowy orange stuff at the end, the sequencing machinery has progressively more difficulty working out the A's, the C's, the G's, and the T's, the longer the sequence is. And it actually tells you in the data how confident it is. So the process is to do what's called trimming. And all that means is getting rid of the red stuff at the start, because it doesn't belong to the organism you're sequencing, and chopping off some amount at the end, just to make sure that you're only working with the high quality stuff in green. And that was Tomkins' first mistake. He didn't trim these reads properly. So the chimpanzee sequence that he was comparing to the human genome looked something like this. So he's still got a chunk of that vector DNA in his query when he goes to compare it to the human genome. And that trace read will typically find a match on the human genome at around 98% or so. But this is where the problem gets worse. To work out the overall identity, Tomkins is taking the number of matching letters, which works out to be 637, but then scaling that against the entire query length of 700 letters. And I want to be super clear about what the ungapped problem actually is. It's not a problem with BLAST itself. Doing ungapped searches is fine if that's what you actually want to do. So BLAST would return a result of 100%, and that result is correct. The problem is what Jeff Tomkins does with that 100%. When he goes to calculate an overall similarity as a percentage, he takes the number of matching letters and divides it by the total query length. And that's wrong, because by using the ungapped parameter, he is intentionally shortening the length of the alignment. And that's why I'm going to start calling it the ungapped/QLen problem rather than just the gapped versus ungapped. Because there's nothing wrong with running an ungapped search per se, it's just Tomkins' calculation method that is wrong. Nothing wrong with BLAST at all. And here is the excerpt from the paper I submitted back in 2014. Feel free to pause and read it here. But all it says is that it's an error to use ungapped with Tomkins' calculation that then takes into account the length of the query. And there's been quite a few people in this arena that thought the entire problem was that the ungapped parameter was used at all. But that's only half the story. And I can understand why they had this misunderstanding, because also in my paper is a very misleading / wrong line that implies that BLAST itself will report that example as 50%, when BLAST will report 100%, but Tomkins will report 50%.
What we did is we had our query organism and our database organism for each of our two comparisons. So let's say we were comparing a dog to a wolf. The dog is our query organism and the wolf is our database organism. One chromosome was compared at a time instead of doing obviously like a full genome comparison. The end result was a full genome comparison, but we did chromosome 1, then chromosome 2, then chromosome 3, etc., etc. So in the case of our dog and our wolf for chromosome 1, from the dog we selected randomly 300 base pairs 1,000 times. So we got a full coverage on chromosome 1 and on every subsequent chromosome of 300,000 base pairs. For the human to chimp comparison, I used the most up-to-date human genome, the completed telomere to telomere assembly, and the most recent chimpanzee genome published in 2023. Excluding the sex chromosomes, which were not available for every species comparison, the good method yielded an average similarity between humans and chimpanzees of 97.8%. This is right around what conventional numbers yield. The range was 96.2% to 98.3%, which is also within the conventional range. My Tomkins methodology with my Tomkins weighting yielded an average percent similarity of 88.8% with a range of 86.2 to 90.5%. This is higher than what Tomkins reported, and I suspect that's because I'm using more up-to-date genomes, but still significantly lower than conventional numbers.
Here, I want everyone to kind of notice two things here, okay? One, notice that she is using what she believes is Tomkins' weighting. She's getting that from Glenn Williamson. She actually says that in the video, but she's getting this information from Glenn Williamson. And so I want everybody to notice that she's using that false understanding of how Tomkins had weighted. Now, in reality, Tomkins actually didn't weight it. He just kind of took the average like he always did. He did this in all 5 of his studies. But Erica and Glenn thought that he had weighted it by dividing it by the query length or taking it as a percent of the query length, which is not what Tomkins did. This misrepresented Tomkins' study. But she got her results based upon that false claim of weighting. So she didn't actually replicate Tomkins' method here. On the contrary, she didn't replicate Tomkins' method. She used a misrepresentation of how Tomkins had did it and to come up with those results. Now, that's the first thing I want you to recognize. The second thing I want you to recognize is the fact that she got numbers that was not quite in agreement with what Tomkins had gotten. So you'll find this as a constant theme. Whenever she doesn't get numbers that are close to what Tomkins got, she suspects it's for other reasons. But when she gets close to it, she thinks it's because she's replicating Tomkins' method. So the confirmation bias appears to be where she assumes confirmation bias, and if she gets the numbers correctly, then she assumes she replicated it. If she doesn't, she tries to argue for a different explanation to why she got the numbers. So this is kind of an oddity that kind of came out when I started to look at this and realized that she was basically flopping back and forth. Like she was, she thinks that if she got somewhere close to Tomkins' method, she must be doing good. She must be replicating the method. If she isn't getting close to it, then it must be some other explanation, because it can't be because she's not replicating Tomkins' method, right? But she didn't replicate Tomkins' method. She assumed a false weighting that Tomkins did not do. So she did not replicate Tomkins' method here.
Now what about dogs and dingoes? The average percent similarity for the good method was 99.5%, with a range of 99.4 to 99.6%. This is not surprising. Very few people are going to contest the relatedness of dogs and dingoes. But by the Tomkins methodology, the average percent similarity was 94.6%, with a range of 93.4 to 96.5. Now, that's still higher than the human and chimp percent similarity by Tomkins' methodology, but something seems to be going on here. Dogs and maned wolves by the good method hashed out to be about 98.3% similar on average, with a range of 98 to 98.5%. Again, not surprising, they're both members of Canidae. Tomkins' method yields a mean percent similarity of 85.5%, with a range of 83.3 to 87%. You'll notice that this is lower than the numbers I got for humans and chimps by Tomkins' methodology, and smack dab in the range for humans and chimps in his own paper. Yikes! Things get worse though, because creationists like Tomkins also think that dogs and foxes are in the same kind. The good method yielded a conventional average of 96.6%, with a range of 96 to 96.9%. And Tomkins' method yields a mean percent similarity of 75.8%, with a range of 75.4 to 77.5%. Because foxes and maned wolves are both more dissimilar to dogs than humans are to chimps, by Tomkins' methodology, we're looking at least a human kind, a chimp kind, a maned wolf kind, a fox kind, and a dog kind that also includes dingo.
Now here, Erica doesn't actually understand what we believe on created kinds. First of all, we don't actually argue for the amount of similarity between animals as proof that something is either related or not related in terms of created kinds. Rather, it's really the kinds of differences. It's the types of differences and similarities that we look at. Not necessarily, we don't necessarily look at how much they are similar to similar. Because animals are going to all be different, and since creationists, particularly YCs, also believe in a common designer, and since we believe in a common designer, we expect that animals with similar ecosystems and similar habitats, similar needs, similar biochemistry, we would expect all that to be similar to itself. So we don't necessarily think that they like mice and that might be similar, but they could also be similar for different reasons, but they could also be different. But organisms that are two different things, that are two different kinds, can actually be similar in respect if they have similar needs, similar ecosystems, similar habitats, similar situations that require certain types of design features and that sort of thing. And so we would expect that even from two different things that are not the same kinds. But at the same time, we also expect some differences even within a created kind, because we believe in speciation. We do believe that variations within a created kind can actually happen. And so our argument is not that, chimps and humans can't be more similar than rats and mice because rats and mice are the same created kind and chimps and humans are not. That's not how we argue. That might be how evolutionists argue, but that's not how we argue. Erica just doesn't understand created kinds. During the actual Tomkins controversy, I actually did an entire video specifically targeting created kinds. Now, I have done another video for the Genesis series where I interviewed Karina Altman on created kinds as well. But I also did my own full-fledged video responding to Erica on created kinds because she doesn't understand that. But in addition to not understanding that, she is basing it all on a false claim of what she thinks Tomkins had weighted it by dividing it by the query length and taking it as a percent of the query, which is not what Tomkins did.
But you can do this with all sorts of animals. For example, lions and lynxes are both supposed to be a part of the cat kind, Felidae. By conventional means, they are on average 97% similar with a range of 96.7 to 97.3%, and conventionally this is still less than humans and chimps.
Tomkins' mean percent similarity is 79.9% with a range of 77.7% to 81.3%, quite a bit lower. All of baboons and rhesus macaques are both meant to be a part of the same kind of Cercopithecidae. They are 97.9% similar by conventional means with a range of 96.9 to 98.1%. And we see the same problem with Tomkins' methods again with an average percent similarity of 86.8% and a range of 81.3 to 88.8%. Standard cows or Bos taurus and water buffalo are 96.3% similar by conventional methods with a range of 96 to 96.6%, again lower than the human-chimp similarity at 98%, and by Tomkins' methodology, the mean is 80.5% with a range of 78.5 to 81.8%, also lower than the human-chimp similarity. And lastly, we have our most distantly related pair, rats versus mice, with a mean similarity by conventional means of 84.4% and a range of 79.8% to 87%, while by Tomkins' methodology, we get an average percent similarity of 41.4% with a range of 40.2 to 43%. Both of these guys are supposed to be of the true rodent kind.
Essentially, Glenn wrote this paper that got all right. Essentially, Glenn wrote this paper that got rejected by for peer review by Anthony Fisher. He's been trying to defend it ever since. And this paper tries to argue for a gap and ungap situation where he says that he claimed that Blast would only report back 50%. Carter flagged this and said, no, that's not true. Blast would record back 100%. So Glenn came back and says, okay, this is kind of a wrong and misleading statement on my part. Blast would report 100%, but Tomkins would report 50%. But this is incorrect too, because that assumes Tomkins divided by the query length, which in a minute we're going to find out that didn't happen. But this is what Glenn is arguing. He's arguing that he divided by the query length, and by doing so, according to his argument, the ungapped parameter made things worse because it intentionally shortened the alignment. Now, all right, first of all, the problem is actually not gap versus ungap. The critics' attempt at keep making this about gap and ungap is ridiculous. But no, it's not about gap and ungap. Since we are dealing with a local alignment, which I'll go into details a little bit in a minute, a local alignment, we're dealing with a local alignment, that's what BLAST is. It stands for Basic Local Alignment Search Tool. That's what BLAST stands for. And because we're dealing with a local alignment, both if you are dividing by the query length in either gapped or ungapped, it would be shortened. Okay, let me explain this. Okay, what exactly is the query? When they talk about query, 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 when they talk about the quarry, what are they referring to? What they're talking about is the sequence length of the base pairs. So you've got an entire sequence that's being compared. Let's say the sequence is 500 base pairs long. Well, that would mean that that is considered the quarry. Now, you wouldn't divide by the quarry because you would always want, because when you're doing the alignment is always going to be less than the quarry. Now, that is true regardless whether you use gapped or ungapped parameter. That would be true regardless. And so it would be bad to divide by the quarry length, even if you had gapped parameter. It'd be wrong to do this. Now, ungapped would be shorter than gapped, admittedly, but it would still be bad to divide by the quarry length either way. All right, blast automatically takes into account the alignment length. It automatically does that by default. It automatically takes in that. So when it does the percentage of each search result, it always takes into account how long the alignment is. So if you got 100 base pairs, right, long, one base pair difference would be like 99% similar. One base pair difference. If you got a base pair over here that's different, and a base pair over here that's different, and that difference would be a 99% similarity. Essentially, it takes the alignment length into consideration. Now, the quarry could be 500 base pairs long, and the alignment could be 100 base pairs long. And you obviously would not want to take it as a percentage of the quarry length because the alignment is already shorter than the quarry. So it would actually be wrong regardless whether you're using gap or ungapped parameters. So this is not about gap versus ungapped. I know the critics are trying to make it out to be that way, but it's not. The real issue comes down to whether or not Tomkins divided by the quarry length or not. So it doesn't matter whether you're dividing by the quarry length with ungapped or gapped, it will still be bad. You shouldn't do that regardless. Now what Glenn is accusing Tomkins of is that when all of everything's said and done, he's assuming he's dividing it by the average quarry length. Now that's not correct, but that's what he's assuming. Glenn's unpublished paper that was not published peer review, but was rejected for peer review. But that paper was trying to attack Tomkins' 2013 paper. Now try to understand something. Glenn has zero evidence that Tomkins is divided by the quarry length. He has no evidence of it. It's not found anywhere in any of Tomkins' papers. You can go from his 2011 paper all the way to his 2018 paper, and none of his papers says anything about him divided by the quarry length. There's not a hint of it. There's not an allusion to it. There's nothing in it that says he's divided by the quarry length. All right. In fact, his 2016 paper is very explicit about taking the average, actually, which is what he actually did. But he didn't divide by the quarry length. And in addition to that, Glenn has not got Tomkins' confirmation they divided by the quarry length. I've got his confirmation, which we'll see in a little bit, that he did not divide by the quarry length, but Glenn does not have Tomkins' confirmation that he divided. So what does he do? Both in his paper and in his video, he tries to use these set of numbers that Tomkins had given him. Now you could find these numbers in his paper, so they're not like a big secret or something. But you could actually do a study of Tomkins' study and discover these for yourself. The quarry length is actually found directly in his 2013 paper, so we'll be looking at that in here in a little bit. But these numbers were given to Glenn by Tomkins a while back, and so he orders them in a certain way to see if he can mathematically determine how did Tomkins come up with his 85% number, and he thinks that if he order it a certain way, he can assess that he can divide by that Tomkins had divided by the query length. As we will see, that's not the case. All right, but I had a particular argument on this. But before I go into that argument, Glenn is trying to respond to that argument on his video. We're going to play a clip from that first, and then we're going to deal with that.
Now, there is one particular YouTuber in this debate that actually doubts that Tomkins scaled his results against the length of the query. So on screen now is an excerpt from my submitted paper, which in turn is showing an excerpt from an email that I got from Tomkins. So I asked him how he was calculating his overall identity, and that's the number on line 8. So let's try and work backwards here and figure it out. The first 5 lines are the simple stats you get from the BLAST results, the average percent identity of each result, the average alignment length, and the average query length. Then he's counted up the number of queries he submitted and also counted the number of hits he got. If you divide line 5, the number of hits you got, by line 4, the number of queries you submitted, you'll see that's exactly equal to line 6. So we can get rid of lines 4 and 5. So now we've just got these first 3 lines and a calculation on line 6. Now let's look at line 8. If you multiply line 6 by line 7, you will get exactly the value in line 8. So both line 6 and line 7 contribute to the overall identity, and we already know where line 6 comes from, so we only need to work out where line 7 comes from. And we've only got 3 numbers left. Gee, I wonder which combination of those numbers is going to give us 96.76%. So let's multiply all 3 of them and see what we get. Oh no, 96.75% instead of 96.76. It can't possibly be those 3 numbers then, says Brian from Apologetics 101.
That's actually not my argument. I didn't say it can't possibly be those 3 numbers. But we'll get into all that in a little bit.
So I'm sure the audience is collectively face-palming at this point because they've already noticed that the line number 3, the average query length, has only 1 decimal place, while all the rest have at least 9 decimal places. And that's all that's happened here. Jeff has rounded the average query length to 1 decimal place. And I'm sorry to everyone that this had to be made explicit, but people who don't have a basic understanding of math really shouldn't be in this debate.
Wow. All right. Okay. Lots of stuff to unpack here. He actually misrepresented my argument. My argument was actually an argument from logic, not math. But the situation gets worse as we move forward here. But before I continue, I wanted to deal with what he said there at the end. He's trying to make it look like that that he's embarrassing me. I'm sorry I have to do this. It's like, you're not embarrassing me. You know, embarrassed yourself, but you didn't embarrass me. My argument was an argument from logic. It wasn't actually an argument from math. My argument wasn't dependent on if he rounded any of his numbers. He could have rounded some of his numbers. I'm fine with that if he did. My argument was settled. My argument was not an argument from math. It wouldn't have mattered if he rounded it. The numbers would still need to be exact in every respect. In order for him to make an inference, in order for him to use that as evidence. Because remember, he's using it as evidence and trying to draw an inference based on the order in which these numbers appear. That means in order for that to be true, the numbers would need to be exact. Okay? And what about this thing where he said at the end about basic logic or basic math, needing to know basic math? Oh my God. Oh man. Okay. I know Glenn, I think Glenn doesn't live in the United States, but I do. And in the United States, basic math is drilled into us. Since we go to school, basic math is drilled into us. I don't need to know advanced math. I don't even have to be good at math to know basic math. Okay, I live in the United States of America. We learn basic math. I went to college and got an associate's in religion, which is Liberty's way of combining theology and biblical studies. And so I've got a specialty in both of those subject matters now. But the point that I'm making here is that even though my degree was not focused on math or anything that relating to math, I still have to take math. I know basic math. I know about rounded numbers. I know how to round numbers. I know that people do round numbers. I'm not against that, nor am I ignoring the idea that he's rounding, possibility of rounding numbers. But that does not mean, one, it doesn't mean that's what he's doing. And second, has nothing to do with my argument. My argument was not an argument from math. It was an argument from logic. But the situation gets even worse. It actually gets worse. The 300 there, based on the query length, okay, the query is the sequence. And so whenever you see the length of either the query or the alignment, it's the number of base pairs. Number of bases or base pairs. Wait a minute. How do you round up from 299 point whatever base pairs to 300? This is something I actually realized. I didn't even think about it until today, and to be honest about it, because I didn't think about it either. But then again, I'm not the one making the counter argument. He's making the counter argument, right? And he didn't realize that. That's the reason why Tomkins only has one decimal place, because his base pairs. Queries are made out of base pairs. It's not a unit of measurement there. So he's not rounding up to 300. It is 300. It's 300 base pairs long. It's like, oh my, what? And you know the bad part is, he thought he was embarrassing me. He embarrassed himself in the process. Wow. But that made the situation even worse. But my argument wasn't dependent upon whether Tomkins rounded any of his numbers. If anything, if he rounded any numbers, that would only make my argument stronger. Because in order for him to make the inference, he would need all the numbers to be exact. And I don't mean that his argument itself would require it. That would be a straw man, because he probably fashioned his argument to where it didn't require it. I'm saying that for his argument, based on what it actually claims to be true, or even remotely true, for him to use that as an inference that Tomkins must have divided by the query length. Of course, it's actually logically fallacious, even if it did, but because of it would be like confirming the consequence, because there would be other reasons for the numbers to be exact. But the point is that in order for him to even make the inference, in order for him to use it as evidence, the numbers need to be exact. All right, this is Glenn Williams' arguments. Average percent identity alignment, 98.689608081. Average alignment length, this is from the numbers that Tomkins had emailed him, according to Glenn, 294.111953678. Average query length, 300.0. Number of query sequence, 437716. Number of query hits, 31502. Average percent hit frequency, 72.124848. 0750075391346. Average percent query identity, 96.76306 347996666666666. That's a lot of sixes. 7. All right. Overall percent DNA identity 69.79. 021252743268694770. All right. So from here, like I said, he is trying to order these in a way where he says that Tomkins must have divided by the Corey length based on how he's ordering these numbers, and therefore he must have divided by the Corey length. Because you order them a certain way, you get similar you get similar percentage, similar numbers. All right. Okay. So here's what he's doing. This is based on what he has sent me through the emails. 98.6896080481 multiplied by 294.111953678 divided by 300.0 and equals 96.752644,769. This is what he showed in the video as well. Glenn's claim of Dr. Tompkins rounding the query length from 300.0 from 299.967698282 and this right here is speculation. All right, and here's the total right here, equaling out 69.79%. All right, essentially this right here is complete speculation, speculating that Tompkins rounded up. Now, of course, he could have always rounded up from 3% or 5%. You don't actually know. The point of my argument is that it was an argument from logic. In order to sit there and make an inference that this is the best, that this is evidence that he must have divided by the query length, the numbers need to be exact. All of them do. Now, he says, oh, well, what if Tompkins rounded up from 300? Well, even if that was the case, it wouldn't hurt my argument any. But like I said, the situation gets worse because the 300 is based on base pairs. So, so is Glenn arguing that there was really 299.967698282332 base pairs linked in the query? Is that what he's arguing? Wow. Okay. So that's bad. But no, I don't think Tompkins rounded the query length. If he had rounded any of the numbers, it wouldn't hurt my argument any. Because my argument was based on logic. And I'm going to get into my argument specifically because I did formulate my argument. Going further, drawing around query length, just a speculation and misunderstands and misrepresents my argument. My argument was an argument from logic, not math, and wouldn't be affected by the idea that Tompkins had or had not rounded from 300, which of course he wouldn't have anyhow because his base pairs are leading. For example, let's say, hypothetically speaking, Tomkins did round up from 299.967698282332. I'm granting this for the sake of argument in order to prove a point. I don't believe that's the case, but I'm proving a point here. As highly unlikely as it may be, how does he know that Tompkins rounded up from that number? If he rounded at all, why not round up from a 3% difference instead of a 1% difference? If the numbers are not exact, then he loses the inference and thus cannot use this as evidence for his position. Glenn needs the numbers to be exact. Now understand something. When I say he needs it to be exact, I don't mean that his argument itself formulates it as such. That would be a straw man. What I'm saying is, based on what his argument does claim, it requires, in order for his argument to be true, it will require these numbers, or at least for him to use it as evidence, it would require these numbers to be exact. All of them. It wouldn't matter which one it is, whether you consider it the total 1% at the end or all of them. They would need to be exact. And the query length would have to be exact too, in order for him to calculate that. but his number winds up being different. All right, it winds up being the actual numbers, and I give the actual numbers. It does not equal out that. It's almost an entire percent difference as a result. All right, so my argument was an argument from logic. Premise one, Glenn uses the numbers to make an inference to be used as evidence that Tomkins must have divided accordingly in Tomkins' 2013 paper. Premise two, for Glenn to use these numbers as inference and evidence that Tomkins must have divided accordingly, he needs the numbers to be exact. Premise three, the numbers are not exact. C, conclusion, therefore, Glenn cannot use these numbers to prove or even to make an inference that Tomkins must have divided by the accordingly. That was my argument. He misunderstood my argument entirely. He thought I was trying to make an argument from math, and therefore, wait a minute, we can round numbers in math, and how silly you are for thinking that otherwise, and I didn't, and that was not even part of my argument. You didn't need to round. It wouldn't matter if Tomkins rounded the numbers or not. All right, let's jump into another thing. Did Tomkins divide by the accordingly? We're going to be jumping into his 2016 paper here in a little bit because Glenn does try to deal with that. But let's deal with this first. Okay, he said I sent him an email a while back. After Glenn first started presenting his argument to me through email. But this is Brian from Politics 101. I was wondering if you could check something out for me. Could you see if you had divided by accordingly in your analysis of 101 chimpanzee trace data set 2016 paper? Now this is because Glenn had made his video called Tomkins is Allergic to Controls, where he responded to his 2016 paper claiming that he had divided by accordingly. Tomkins came back and says, I did not divide by the accordingly. I don't know where you are getting that from. I took a simple mean average of the alignment identities. And I mentioned that I got it from Glenn, that Glenn was arguing that. I didn't agree with him, that that's not my argument. But that's what Glenn was arguing. All right, now I want to turn my attention to Tomkins' 2013 paper. Before we leave that, I want to be able to show you where it's actually explicitly in this paper that he took an average. Or I wanted to show you in this paper where the query length was and that sort of thing. All right, we're here. This is This is Tomkins' 2013 paper, Comprehensive Analysis, Chimpanzee and Human Chromosome Reveals Average DNA Similarity 70%. This had a bug in the algorithm. We've already spoken about that before. But he wanted to claim other things too here. His unpublished paper. Now here's where it presents the average correlate. You can count down and it's like 12,300. So that is his average query length. Also look at this. Optimized slice size produce top similarity number of bases. So these are a number in bases here. So look, 300, 300. These are actually not rounded. They're bases. These are how many letters is in the sequence. Okay? So you don't round that from a fraction. That's Glenn for you. You look at over here, the percent similarity is also different. Even for 300s, like you got 300, you got 69.0 here and 68.9. You get different percentages. Now, of course, if he's basing this on alignments, that would make sense. You'd have different alignment, lengths, and so forth, and different reasons why there would be different percentages there. But, and of course, you also have the same thing for ones that are not 300, such as you got 350 here, also got 250 over here, got 500 right here, 450 right here, and so forth. But you have different percentages. Now, if you have the alignment length different, that would explain that. If the query lengths are different, or rounded up, then you would have a problem. Which I assume Glenn thinks that each one of these were rounded up from the same number. But at any rate, yeah. So no, Tomkins did not divide by the Coriolan. Okay, you can see here from the summary, it says only 69% of the chimpanzee X chromosome was similar to human, only 43% of the Y chromosome. A chimp autosomal similarity to human on average was 70.7%. So he was taking an average here, with the average of 66.1% to 77.9% depending on the chromosome genome-wide. Only 70% of the chimpanzee DNA was similar to human under the most optimal sequence slice conditions. So yeah, so Tomkins is taking an average. So Tomkins did not sit there and divide by the Coriolan, his 2013 paper. In a little bit, we're going to look in his 2016 paper, but we're going to let Glenn flesh out that argument as well.
So let's have a closer look at how he actually calculates that overall percentage identity, and I've highlighted the specific line in green. So nident stands for the number of identical nucleotides, and qlen is the length of your query. So the overall percentage identity is simply the number of nucleotides that match divided by the number of nucleotides that we were searching for. And here's a really simple example. The chimpanzee query sequence we've got is 10 DNA letters long, and we're looking in the human genome for the closest match. And we found the sequence at the bottom, and 8 out of the 10 nucleotides match. So the overall identity is 8 out of 10, which is 80% identical. Very, very simple stuff.
Well, Glenn ended up through an email, sent me a similar thing, like what you saw there on the screen, where it's supposed to be from Tomkins' script, right? And I actually tracked down both of them in the script. But he sends me one, and I send it to Tom. Well, originally, he sent me one with there, and I asked Tomkins about it, and he gave me a reply back, and I've got the email exchange, and I'll show it to you in a minute, the excerpts. He also had that one, a particular one from Tompkins' script on screen as well. And I took the liberty of asking about that too. Tompkins didn't reply originally because he got busy, and then I called him up. He told me over the phone. He didn't take a look at it at the time when I originally sent it to him, so he went and looked at it, and he told me what it was really about. So this one's kind of a funny one. But he sent me an email to officialize it so I can put it on screen to use my video. But it's actually a pretty funny situation there. But so in a little bit we're going to be talking about what he presented on screen as well. Did Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins divide by the Coriolan in his 2016 paper? Okay, again, if Glenn had any evidence from his 2016 paper, you just have to point to it. You just have to quote from the reference. It also does not make a whole lot of sense for you to accuse him of dishonesty there, but then assume, then why would he put it in his script, in his GitHub account? Because that's what those are from, is from his GitHub account. You should be able to point to a reference in his 2016 paper very easily and proving your point, but they can't. So let's dive in there, and we'll look at I got some slides, and we'll look and see if that's the case. All right. All right. First was a excerpt from Tompkins' GitHub account that Glenn had sent me, and so I asked him about this. He said Glenn Williamson has sent me a link proving, I put it in quotes, the word proving is in quotation marks because Glenn was using the script as evidence against me, but it turns out this was also misunderstood by Glenn, as you'll see in a second, that you had divided by the Coriolan, and you had told me previously that you didn't divide by it for your 2016 paper. I can't read the script properly, so I need help to understand what I am looking at. The link was found here, where Glenn had highlighted place he claimed he divided by the query length. This is the link to it. Please, can you look at it and tell me what it means? God bless. And he says, and Tomkins replied back, I don't see anywhere in the script where I divided by the query length. The script merely pulled out the sequence identity column 5 from a CSV file of blast output and determined the basic mean average. I also determined other basic mean data, average alignment length, average query length, etc. And this is from email exchange between me and Dr. Tomkins. Well, let's check that out, shall we? All right, we're here. This was the actual link here for that. This is the one that he had highlighted for me as well. And here's the thing. This right here is all based on this right here. So what Tomkins did was he was getting an average of all these different numbers. See, it says get averages for each sequence file. That's all he was doing there. It says round average PI dent as average PI dent, minimum PI dent as min PI dent, round average gap open, round mismatch, round average Q length, one around average NI dent as average NI dent, and it says sum NI dent, that's the sum total of the nucleotide identity, divided by the sequence, the number of sequences that Tomkins used, 25,000, multiplied by the average Q length, multiplied by 100 as overall identity. So in other words, this was his taking an average, okay, of the nucleotide identities, of the sum total of the nucleotide identities, divided by the amount of sequences they use, multiplied by the average Q length, to multiplied by 100 as overall identity. So he was taking the average. He was just taking the average. In fact, he took an average of all of these different various variables. And so that's all that was actually about. That's what Tomkins was talking about. That he only took the average of it. And you'll see, it actually is in his paper as well. Let's go to his paper real quick. All right, we're here in Tomkins' 2016 paper, analysis of 101 chimpanzee trace read data sets, assessment of their overall similarity to human and possible contamination with human DNA. All right, he actually tells you in his paper that he took the average. Because previous versions of the BLAST-N algorithm are proven to omit query sequences when blasting using large query databases, Tomkins 2015 non-hitting sequences were reblasted to verify the algorithm was working correctly. Also, another thing that Glenn makes the mistake of, he'll say this later, well, he'll claim that Tomkins did not use any controls, and that Tomkins, for his 2016 paper, and that Tomkins did not blast this against the human genome or against the chimp genome. That was false. He did. In fact, he reblasted the non-hitting areas as well to make sure there was no problem wrong with the algorithm. In all cases, the reblasted sequences provided hits, as was in the case in previous releases of the algorithm, that exhibit the bug. Clearly, the bug had been fixed, perhaps due to a part complaint to the developer team at NCBI by this author. All right, essentially, Tomkins took the average of the percentage. He actually says he took the average. The average alignment identity was 96% with an average alignment of 677 bases. He took the average. That's all he did was he took the average. So it's actually in Tomkins' paper that he actually took the average length. There's nothing in this 2016 paper that says anything, not even a hint, not even an illusion that he divided by the query length. All right. Now, what about the insert that Glenn has in his thing, the very one which he based on what he thinks is Tompkins' calculation method? This one is funny. It actually isn't even Tompkins' data, but we'll get into that. All right, let's show my slides again. All right, this is the paper or the screenshots in Glenn's video that we saw earlier. Um, and I decided to sit there and send Tomkins another. Well, actually, this is the one that Glenn sent me. Okay, this is the one that Glenn sent Tomkins, or sent, put in his video about allegedly Tomkins had divided by the accordingly, and he had this marked up here like that. Okay, so I had a conversation with Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins. Originally, I had it over the phone, and then I asked him to send me an email so I could be able to show that. First, our phone conversation. This is what our phone conversation said. The script was taken from a series of data pulled from GenBank and organized by Dr. Tomkins in order for him to see what was going on. He said he wanted to see what was going on there. So he pulled a data from GenBank's data. This was GenBank's data. And he just pulled it from there to try to organize it and see what's happening. You want to know what was going on here with the data and what they did. This data never even made it into 2016 paper. That's what he told me. He said this data wasn't in his paper. This script is not a complete script or program, but a series of individual query commands for many different types of data extractions containing various metadata. This is what Tomkins told me. This script contained other metadata as well. It contained other metadata that just kind of got ignored by Glenn. Tomkins did not divide by the query length. All right. So I asked him to send me a email. This is my original email, and this is the like I said, I called him shortly after sending this email a few days afterwards, and Tomkins sent me this email following that in order to give me the official statement from him in response to what Glenn did. I said, this is Brian for Politics 101. In the upcoming video, Gap versus Non-Gap, I will be officially responding to Glenn Williamson in my series on his false allegation that you had divided by the query length in your 2013 and 2016 papers. This would also be me responding to these two videos that Glenn has produced. In one of his videos, he goes to your script to try to prove the allegation you had already dealt with. The script he sent me a while back, correctly pointing out the script was just you taking an average. However, in this video, he proves a different script and claims that this proves that you divided by the query length. I sent him the link to Tomkins' script to highlight this block of text in his GitHub account. And he goes further and says, Tomkins, send me back the email following our phone conversation. Glenn has pulled out a single line from an SQL query that was not even reported in my paper. My paper used the percent identity spit out by BLAST-N for the alignment itself, which did not include the whole query sequence link. In fact, the text document that Glenn cherry-picked a single line of code from was not a complete script or program, but a huge set of individual SQL query commands for many different types of data extraction from a database that had not even had the BLAST-N results for each sequence, but other metadata such as the year the sequence was produced, the lab location, the quality values for the sequence, etc. Wow. All right. So essentially, this means that Dr. Tomkins, that the thing that he's showing in the script was actually not Tompkins' data. It was GenBank's data. He pulled it out to see what was going on. It was a single line. It wasn't even a complete code or command or anything like that. So, in other words, it was nothing that had to do with anything he did with the blast, with his study as far as calculations, method, or anything like that. Yeah, it wasn't even his data. It was Jim Bake's data. He was just trying to organize it. This was like terrible. Okay, so basically, Glenn, uh, uh, he pulled out a script that where Tompkins did not divide by the Coriolan. Now think about this for a second. If he divided by the Coriolan, you should be able to find it in his papers. If those scripts, if a specific script refers to what Tompkins did in his papers, then the papers themselves should be able to prove that Tompkins divided by the Coriolan. You wouldn't need to point to a script, but you're pointing to a script because, well, you don't have any evidence that Tompkins divided by the Coriolan. That's the problem. In his 2016 paper, actually says he took the average. So no, he did not divide by the Coriolan. That is false. So yeah, but this is crazy. But no, Tompkins did not divide by the Coriolan. By the way, when we were talking on the phone, he agrees, Glenn, he agrees that dividing by the Coriolan would be absurd. That's not what he did. He's a geneticist. He knows what he's doing. I know that you don't think he does, but he does. And he did not divide by the Coriolan. Okay, that would be silly because it's a local alignment. Uh, it's going to be less than the Coriolan no matter what. Whether you're using gap or ungap is irrelevant. It's going to be less than the Coriolan unless unless you're doing a global alignment, which then would include the entire sequence. But no, Tomkins did not divide by the Coriolan in either of his 2013 paper nor his 2016 paper. Did he divide by the Coriolan? In fact, he didn't divide by the Coriolan in any of his papers. Glenn admits that he's speculating that he divided by the Coriolan in his 2015 paper, and only reason he thinks that because he thinks he divided by the Coriolan in his 2013 paper, which he did not, because his 2015 paper is redoing of his study in his 2013 paper. And so, but no, Glenn, he didn't divide by the Coriolan. I just want to reiterate this point very quickly. Basically, Erica had used a faulty weighting that her and Glenn was claiming that Tompkins used that he did not use in order to sit there and argue for a much lower similarity. And you saw that how where those values fell, right? Um, Most of them didn't even fall even close to where Tompkins was, and the ones that did, like I said, she'll sit there and say, "Oh, well, see there, it fall much slower than chimp similarity," but yet, Tompkins, and then you got 40% on rats and 70%. It was like all over the place. It just kind of jumped all over the place. It's because she was using a weighting that Tompkins did not use. And she had a tendency to think, oh, well, it's below chimp and human similarity, so therefore, it's because this, faulty weighting Tompkins used, except Tompkins didn't use that. So in her first experiment, she didn't apply max HPS1, a critical parameter that she needed to use by her own admission. So she did not replicate the experiment there. Additionally, with that, this actually caused her to get discredited during the discussion. So I don't know why she thought she had killed this creationist argument when she actually got discredited during that discussion. She wasn't a geneticist. Normally, I had no problem with someone speaking on genetics that's not a geneticist. But the issue, however, happened that she didn't know what she was talking about, and that's where the issue lied. That she had no idea what she was doing, and so she made some very public mistakes as a result. And so people began to not trust what she had to say on this matter. Now she had posted a new video on that and act like she had replicated Tompkins' method when she didn't. The second round of experiments, she did redo her experiments, but she did so assuming this false calculation method that she thought Tompkins was doing. But Tompkins wasn't doing that. So she wound up misrepresenting his study, just like Glenn did, and didn't replicate, for the second time, did not replicate Tompkins' experiments. And studies. She didn't replicate his methods on either case. Um, she also has a faulty understanding of what we believe on created kinds. It's not really based on the amount of similarity as much as it is on the types of similarity and differences that they have, which is fundamental to determining two different things that are the same kind versus two different things that are two different kinds. And she didn't understand that either, and that sort of thing. And so she applied her faulty understanding. She has been corrected on this many times, but that doesn't stop her from misrepresenting what we actually argue for created kinds and not understanding our concept of common designer. But yeah, I did want to reiterate that point because she did make those two crucial mistakes in her analysis, which caused her not to replicate Tompkins' experiments. She didn't know what she was doing. Glenn had to take over for her. Glenn didn't do very much better, but he still tried to take over for her because of her mistakes being very public. And you see her in her redone experiment video where she actually had to rely heavily on Glenn Williamson's claims rather than on her own. It's because she got badly discredited during that discussion. So basically, she did not replicate Tompkins' method the first time or the second time. So during the discussion, Erica got discredited badly. So badly that Glenn Williamson felt the need to have to take over in the conversation. He thought that he had to have a direct impact on the actual debate itself because Erica was making some really bad mistakes that were going really public really fast. And so Glenn decided to take over. He does a couple videos. I responded to those videos in the Tomkins controversy as well, in Gap versus Ungap. And I did a video also on weighted versus unweighted as well. And so, and I was probably the last one because I think Carter started to move on. Erica had already moved on. Glenn had done anything else after that on the subject matter, and I was literally the last person to eventually bow out of this discussion. But I went all the way down to my last episode of the Tompkins controversy, and now some new studies have come out, and Erica claims that she is still claiming that she replicated Tompkins' method. She did not replicate Tompkins' method. In fact, she did not. She did not replicate Tompkins' method. She did not have. Her results were still bogus because she divided by the query length, something Tompkins did not do. Now, I demonstrated this during the Tompkins controversy. I even had a direct quote from Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins himself, showing that this was actually a misrepresentation of his study. This is not what Tomkins did. Tomkins did not do this. In the 2013 study that Glenn tried to argue for, he tried to argue this because of certain numbers, and he tried to calculate certain numbers in a certain order, but then it did not actually come out to exactly. In order for his inference to be correct, it would have to have been exact, and it wasn't. And he tried to claim that Tompkins must have rounded up from a query. The query is based on the base pairs. Okay, how do you go from a fraction of a base to a whole base? You can go from whole base to whole base, but now how do you do fraction of a base to up and round it up to a whole base? Exactly. I don't know. That was weird. But in any given case, it doesn't matter. My argument was logical, not mathematical. So Glenn kind of misrepresented my argument anyhow. But that was not because I was arguing that it would, in order for him to actually be able to infer that, the numbers would have to be exact, and they were not exact. So this shows that this is not what Tomkins did. He just trying to sequence the numbers in such a way that looked like they did it that way, but that's not the way Tomkins did it. Obviously, Tomkins did not take it as a percent of the query length. What he did do is he averaged them all out. Now, in Erica's newest video on this, on I kill this creationist argument, she doesn't even mention at all during the course of the video. She doesn't even mention her mistake that she made, Glenn Williamson's miscalculation that she took in her second round of experiments. And she sat there and tried to argue that she had replicated Tompkins' method, which she did not. And she failed to mention anything crucial that happened during that Tompkins controversy. She did talk about Richard Buggs, but she just kind of hand waved around. Well, I don't know of any team of evolutionists that have come up with that. And does that even matter? The bottom line is when you take these differences and plug them back in, it comes up less than 85% similarity. In fact, some recent studies that have come out now, a recent study on this, and showed the differences between 12.5% to 27.3%. And so when you factor these differences in, it is less than 25%, as I showed in a recent video. But anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to discuss how that these events that did occur during the case of Tompkins controversy, and Erica, who wanted to downplay it and not actually mention what really happened. Erica was discredited during that discussion. She was discredited. She was discredited so badly that her own fellow critic, Glenn Williamson, who she praises, had to take over for her. That's how bad she just got debunked during the discussion. So it's really weird that she kind of came back in, and I think she's doing what a lot of critics tend to do. They seem to think that if they reintroduce the arguments again to an audience that does not know any better, that maybe that they have a chance. But the reality is there are still people around that were familiar with the discussion, remembers, that she had flaked out of this discussion because she had bombed out of it because she had done the because she made that critical mistake with the parameter that Tomkins didn't do, and the second time she took it as a percent of the query length in her calculations, which Tomkins didn't do either. So both times she did not replicate Tompkins' method. Now, in her new video, she admitted that Tomkins had averaged out all the results, which is very different than what she was accusing Tomkins of beforehand. Because before, she was accusing Tomkins of weighting it incorrectly for the first 4 studies, and then on the 5th study, she accused him of not weighting it at all. But now she's accusing him of averaging out in all 5 studies, which is true, but that's not what she said during the discussion of the original discussion. So I don't know if she realized that was incorrect, that she was misrepresenting Tompkins's study, what went there. But either way, when she did her initial experiments, that is what she assumed. She assumed, the first one was she didn't employ a critical parameter that she needed to put in there, and she averaged out all these various results. And the second, she sat there and took it as a percent of the query, both of which Tomkins did not do, so she did not replicate Tompkins' method. She got bogus results in both cases, but they were not Tompkins' results. And she wants to talk about created kinds. She don't understand created kinds. We don't need the animals to be of a certain percent. I mean, God could create any amount of percentage between created kinds. I mean, there could be very few differences between these two pairs of of the same kind versus these two pairs of the same kind, but these few differences are so fundamental that they prevent hybridization between those kinds. And so our position does not require that that the created kinds be a certain amount of genetic similarity. So this idea, well, yeah, mice and rats share more more different than humans and apes, even if that was the case. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case or not, but even if that's the case, that would not hurt our position at all. So like I said, I don't think that Erica really understands our position on created kinds. I did talk about this during the Tomkins controversy too, as well. But that's all I wanted to talk about. I hope this at least been educational in terms of understanding what actually took place during the events of the Tomkins controversy. Erica has tried to lead a kind of a misleading sort of a way of understanding what actually took place. Uh, Erica was discredited badly, and she did not replicate Tompkins' method, no matter what she tried to claim. So it's kind of odd that she tried to claim that, because even in her after she confessed to the first one, she actually admitted to not replicating Tompkins' method there, at least in the first round of experiments. But anyway, she didn't actually replicate Tompkins' method at any given time. But anyhow, and make sure you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And there's more. There's more to come with the Tompkins Controversy Revisited series. This is a 5-part series. I plan on getting into talking to you in a little bit more detail concerning the paper that came out. The study was Dr. Richard Buggs' new follow-up blog, and talking to you about the 26% similarity in the Y chromosome. So we're going to be discussing all that actually in the next video even. And of course, we're also going to be responding to Erica's videos. She has 2 videos out now. I'm not going to respond to any other videos besides those 2 if she does come out with some more. And also Joel Duff's new video that he's got out. We're going to be responding to that. All right. I will see y'all on the next one, and thank you for watching Apologetics 101.